Welcome to the Numerical Tarot. A new tarot paradigm. An alternative to tradition. An axial system of archetypal crystallography. A transculturally anthropomorphized, life-biased binary influence calculator. A wisdom system and archetype enhancer, with harmony of interpretation throughout. The content of all the videos in this series are excerpts, edits and brief summaries from the eBooks All Things Are Numbers and All Things Are Patterns, links below. For a more complete explanation of each idea, additional reading might be helpful. Hopefully the basic ideas come across enough to pique your interest in trying this alternative approach to tarot. Okay, before we get into this, I think I should warn you that what follows might be kind of confusing if you haven't watched at least some of the videos that precede it. All the videos in this series, thus far, build one idea upon another. So it would be best if you have come to this with all that background. If the YouTube algorithm has suggested this video to you, out of the blue, that is a random act that is unfortunate. Sorry. You can try it anyway, it's not super weird. But it might be. For those who are following along, let's get to it. As we continue to examine the inevitable spiritual tone that emerges from this study of the archetypally primordial patterns of nature, the concept known as the absentia is probably the most curious. What this study calls the absentia might, to some minds, be roughly comparable to what some call Tao, or what others might see as the all, but, with some subtle differences, at least in how I attempt to describe this indescribable, unknowable, or ineffable force. In the system of comprehending consciousness being presented everywhere in this study, the absentia is seen as an ultimate neither. The absentia is neither material nor ethereal. Yet, at the same time, it is both material and ethereal. It is both chicken and egg in one, and neither chicken nor egg at all. In this way, it is seen as a beginningless beginning that births the nothingness of our universe, out of which galactic-like whirlpools of something emerge. Among the writings of the occultist, the Kybalion presents an interesting view of an unknowable source. To the Eastern mind, the Tao Te Ching is also a kind of philosophy, with many good ideas. Because these documents deal with an ineffable source and the ways in which we are to find or know this source, they both tend to speak in ways that are often paradoxical. Thus, the net result of how they tell us to live can seem a long way off to many. And the cumulative result of their instruction can, at times, mislead if not perfectly understood. What this study refers to as the absentia is also an unknowable, ineffable source that can only be comprehended using paradox. In this way, many of the ideas being presented in this study may seem confusing or hard to adopt as ways of living or perceiving. But, if understood relative to the paradox of a divine source, they can, to some minds, make perfect sense. Thus, it is this requirement of accepting paradox as a ruling force in our universe that prevents many from finding their way to that divinity. In the Tao Te Ching and the Kybalion, it is made clear that the unobtainable must remain unobtained. The same holds true with the absentia. The absentia is the logical opposite to our universe. Thus, to obtain the absentia would mean losing the universe. In this study of consciousness, the absentia is not material nor ethereal, it is paradoxically both, and neither, at the same time. Thus, within the confines of the tarot universe being discussed in this study, this unobtainable source can only be spoken of by way of paradox. However we try to add to it, it can't be increased. However we try to take from it, it can't be diminished. In my opinion, that statement points to the most critical aspect of any unobtainable source, specifically, that it does not belong to any universe where things can be added to or taken from. In other words, it doesn't belong to any universe at all, it is in fact an anti-universe, meaning we can increase forever and never find it, or we can decrease forever and never find it. Or, likewise, we can compound to complexity and never find it, or we can reduce to simplicity and never find it. As it is, the divine source we seek is not part of whatever universe is attempting to find it. Thus, it is ultimately and infinitely unfindable by any universal means. Yet, it permeates our existence. How? It permeates our existence by being necessarily excluded from our existence. In other words, we are here because this divine source isn't. As long as it isn't, we are. Thus it is that in this study of fundamental, archetypal, primordial patterns of nature, we label this necessarily absent quality by calling it the absentia. The absentia is one step beyond infinity, whether that infinity be the infinitely large or the infinitely small. In this way, the absentia is a singularity of consciousness that is binary in nature. One place, in two places. The absentia is found in two places we can never get to, the end of the infinite, that we can increase forever and never find, and the center of the finite, that we can decrease forever and never find. Two unknowable points of impossibility with a theoretical connection between them that is itself characteristically impossible, which, in the end, makes them both into one, making the absentia a singularity that is binary. Here is a mandala we can use to meditate on this idea of a Godforce that is not part of the universe that is attempting to perceive it, while at the same time having an inexorable influence upon the inhabitants of that universe. This image has appeared in previous videos, but without a full explanation of what it shows. In this mandala, the large gear is the infinite universe, symbolized by the infinite spiral inside. The spiral also symbolizes how we can increase forever and never find this paradoxical Godforce, and how we can also decrease forever and never find it. The gear of paradox, outside the universe, turns the opposite direction as the universe, and the model of existence inside, making its position characteristically unique and symbolically not compatible with the universe it moves. The point where all three gears come together is a point of unity, the point where a model of existence, attempting to understand its universe, encounters the unity of nothingness, and where the unity of nothingness encounters paradox. The larger gear is like a glass ceiling that we will never pass beyond, it is an enclosure we can see through but cannot pass through. The outer gear, with dotted circle and stylized paradox, Godforce, Mobius, Tau, Absentia symbol within, is the cosmic egg. Like the Sphinx that sits atop the Wheel of Fortune, in the Wheel of Fortune tarot card, it supervises the turning of the wheels of the universe below. The birthed universe then grows in complexity, spiraling out. The spiraling in the large gear represents this idea of compounding complexity that is the inevitable result of any universe that is hatched. Around and around we go, forever increasing our universe through acquired knowledge and experience. But we can never return to the egg that hatched us. We can become nothing and know that unity. But we, as living beings within an infinite universe, can never know the egg that hatched us and our universe. The large gear and the large dotted circle are both unities. Paradox, Godforce, Mobius, Tau, Absentia is, by law, not part of any universe attempting to find it. So it is a unity that cannot be known or even spoken. The universe is another unity. It is a unity that can be known, or at least spoken. Together they form the vesica piscis, the Pythagorean notion of monad reflecting itself into a universe, creating a dyad of duality. In the fish bladder of the vesica piscis sits the fourfold model of existence being put forth within these videos, with spinning arms of galactic-like rotation. That circle is you, inside a universe, inside two unities that equal a cosmic duality, with a sense that there is some unseen, unknowable force that drives the gears of a mechanical universe. Together, these three circles represent the three unities of none and one. The paradox, Godforce, Mobius, Tau, Absentia, cosmic egg, womb, is perplexing, to say the least. It is like nothing we can conceive, yet it is the source of everything we conceive. Likewise, we cannot hold it with body nor mind, yet it is the source of our body and mind. It allows us to conceive of everything, except itself. We can't draw it. It draws us. So, as we indulge ourselves further and further into this so-called spiritual tone, we would do well to define further exactly what we mean by the absentia as a Godforce or Godhead to our surrounding philosophy of life, that emerges from the patterns of nature we are using, as a foundation for the archetypal nature of humanity and tarot. What is the absentia? Fundamentally, the absentia is a theoretical Godforce, for lack of a better term, that births and subsequently influences the hypothetical, fictional, universe that is created and discussed everywhere else in this study. Here is a verse that can be used to begin an understanding of exactly what the absentia is, or isn't. Behold the absentia. Behold its divine mystery. Know that you are here because it is not. You do not dwell within it. It does not dwell within you. Your finite forms cannot contain it. Your infinite grasp cannot reach it. In a locationless location it is neither. When sought it is either. When found it is both. As such, the more you look, the less you see. And the less you look, the more you see. So approach it with stillness. And speak of it with silence. By this alone, it is within and without you. Through it you are found. Through you it is found. Together all are bound. Let's dissect this verse line by line. Behold the absentia. The first thing we should acknowledge is that this verse is a hypocrisy of description. By that I mean, the absentia is not of this universe. The absentia is ineffable. The absentia is unknowable. The absentia is absent from any universe attempting to know it. Thus, any form of discussion of it only makes it something it isn't, which is fundamentally hypocritical. But inasmuch as we are attempting to clothe an ineffable mystery to see where it is, we continue. Behold its divine mystery. This is just superfluous, bombastic rhetoric designed to mesmerize the faithful into believing they are about to hear something important. I just threw this in for fun. Normally, I prefer a direct, straightforward, non-reverent approach to the presentation of ideas. You can throw this line out if you prefer. But, with or without this line, the absentia is divine. It is the mother of all. It is the father of all. Know that you are here because it is not. The absentia yields a universe of sides. The universe of sides reduces to paradox, and through the impossibilities of paradox, becomes something not compatible with a possible universe, i.e., it becomes transcendent. The absentia puts the universe of opposites into motion and departs, like a string leaving a top. Thus, the possible universe of everything and nothing is seen as the logical opposite to the impossible realm of the absentia, which we are promoting here as a Godforce. We live in the possible universe and can't know its impossible, incompatible opposite, except by clothing it in paradox. You do not dwell within it. Correct, we dwell within the infinity of nothingness and the finite forms of everythingness that make up the universe half of the universe absentia duality. The absentia is the ineffable hand that rocks the cradle. We are here because it is not. It does not dwell within you. Correct, the absentia is a point of transcendence that cannot be contained. Even as sides converge and produce paradox, paradox is only the visible vestige of the immanent transcendence of the absentia. The absentia does not dwell anywhere. But, paradoxically, even though the absentia cannot be contained, it is at the core of everything. The absentia. Can't live with it? Can't live without it. Your finite forms cannot contain it. The absentia lives one step beyond the finite. Do not bother building churches, mosques, and temples, it will not dwell within them. All attempts to contain the absentia lead to an infinitesimally small and infinitely indefinable center that remains as uncontained and undefined as its outer counterpart outside. In other words, the infinite inside and the infinite outside are the same. They both defy containment. The outside will transcend to the inside, and the inside will transcend to the outside. All finite forms that reside between, like buildings, churches, mosques, and temples, are inconsequential to this flow. The absentia is always as much outside as it is inside. Not to be owned by anyone's attempt at containment. Your infinite grasp cannot reach it. Thinking and praying might change our destiny, or even the world by affecting the fabric or web of spacetime that unites us all. But the absentia is not of this world, so thinking and praying in the normal sense will not reach the absentia. The absentia lives one step beyond infinity. To think or pray to the absentia a language of paradox is the only hope we have of making a connection. So, hold on by letting go. Say it without speaking. Approach without moving. See more by not looking. In a locationless location it is neither. The absentia is neither here nor there. It is not something. It is not nothing. It is neither. It is a place without a place. When sought it is either. The state or condition of the absentia is unknowable, and, until found, could be either something or nothing. It could be particle. It could be a wave. It could be alive. It could be dead. We don't know until we look for it. When found it is both. The absentia is found in paradox, where things are impossibly both. Paradox is like paint poured over an invisible man to see where he is. If it becomes something we have not found it. If it becomes nothing we have not found it. If it is exclusively neither, indeterminably either or paradoxically both we have found it. The more you look, the less you see. Like a quantum cloud of probability, looking makes the absentia into something it is not. In fact, just bringing it up as a topic of conversation makes it something less than what it actually is. Thus, the absentia that can be spoken is not the true absentia. You can't draw a picture of it. You can't sing a song about it. The less you look, the more you see. To find the absentia, look where there is no universe. In other words, see more by not looking. A concept that might be of particular significance to those who believe that faith is all important. Don't try to prove the things we are supposed to accept on faith. We need the absentia to not be here in order for our universe to be here. If, by lack of faith, we force the absentia to be something, we lose it. Don't look, and it's there. So approach it with stillness. By not doing, we are doing what we should be doing. By not looking for the absentia, we ensure that it is there. Be still and know that it is. But don't be fooled, stillness alone does not find it. Stillness is only half of what we need to do. So in doing nothing, expect nothing in return. Then do something about it. In other words, utilize paradox and approach, do something, with stillness, do nothing. And speak of it with silence. Utter what you know of it, by not uttering what you know of it. Thus it is that this video is a violation of this maxim, and a complete hypocrisy of description. This idea might be important to those who believe that, as a Godforce, his name should never be uttered. There may be some who think that the name of God should not be uttered out of respect and reverence. But when God is considered as paradox, we see how uttering his name in fact makes him something he is not, something less than he actually is. Thus it is profane to speak of the absentia, through mouth, or pen, or paintbrush, or dance, or any other manifest instrument of humanity, like a video. By the absentia being something that just isn't. The universe becomes something that just is. By this alone, it is within and without you. By not looking, not doing, not speaking, and not containing, we find it, within and without us. If we look, do, speak, or contain, it changes into something it is not, like a mirage. So don't anthropomorphize the absentia into some kind of God who sits on a throne in heaven and walks beside us, or among us, judging us. The absentia is not a him or a her, or even an it for that matter. One word of absentia is too many, so to refer to the absentia as an it is a hypocrisy of description. Calling the absentia is a hypocrisy of description. For that reason it is suggested that we embrace paradox as the most representative form of this unspeakable form. Because paradox is the irreducible crux of universal flux. The absentia is a singularity, in two places. It is beyond the infinitely large and the infinitely small, with a universe of possibilities between. Thus, as a singularity in two places, unity is dual. In this way, the paradox of the absentia is the ultimate symmetry. Paradox is the irreducible crux of universal flux. Through it you are found. The absentia is absent, or in absentia, not here, nowhere. There is only you, here and now. We can only enter the absentia by exiting, and only by exiting do we enter. Thus, by entering the absentia, we immediately exit, and come upon ourselves, chasing our own tail. By coming to this realization and no longer chasing our tail, we are found. Thus, struggles of life cease, because we have nowhere to go but to be here, now. The absentia is a black hole at the center of a galaxy. Entering puts you at the end of the line of others entering and being put at the end of a line that is forever entering. Through you it is found. By being in absentia, the absentia is no concept at all, not possible, unobtainable, and by necessity absent from any universe attempting to know it. Thus it is a locationless concept, or no concept. But through the universe that is born from it, each manifest entity becomes a doorway to that transcendence, at its infinitesimal center. So even though there is really nothing there, it does not dwell within us. The potential for transcendence that is enclosed within every manifest entity effectively shows us where the absentia is. It puts a temporary location on a locationless concept, or no concept. If the galaxy was not there, the black hole would not be seen. There is also a kind of play with words at work here, because of how we immediately pass into and out of the absentia when seeking it, and how the invisible lines of force that connect the inner and outer aspects of the absentia resemble the lines of force that surround a magnet, and pass invisibly through the manifest substance that is the magnet itself. So, going through us, it is found to be, or it is found to be passing through us. And, by passing through us, the absentia finds itself. That is our divine function. People who think that we were put on this earth to serve the Lord might choose to convert this idea into that. Together all are bound. The absentia yields a universe of sides. Through paradox, the universe of sides reduces back to the absentia. The absentia is the glue between opposite sides of the universe. The universe is the glue between opposite, inner and outer realms of the absentia. So from the absentia we get sides and opposites. By moving beyond sides and opposites we get the absentia. It is an ultimate symmetry of split absentia equals unified universe, split universe equals unified absentia. Untwist the twisted part of a Mobius strip, and we twist what was the untwisted part. Thus, this relationship becomes a representation of the notion of man creating God and/or God creating man. The absentia. It is what it is when it isn't. Here is a mandala you can use to meditate on this idea of an absentia that, through you, is found, and through which you are found. You are here because it is not, so to find the absentia, look where there is no universe. In this mandala, the triangular arrows running around the outside represent the same lines of force seen in the wreath mandala elsewhere in this study. Lines of force that were just compared to the invisible lines of force surrounding a magnet. They illustrate the concept of a singularity in two locations, outer and inner. The top and bottom symbols are the absentia. The left and right symbols are the universe. Both top and bottom rings have the highly stylized symbol of a Mobius strip to symbolize the paradox that is found within the realm of absentia. The top absentia is the outer absentia that yields to the two-sided universe of possibilities, symbolized with two mirrored universe symbols. The bottom absentia is the inner absentia where the two-sided nature of a universe of opposites is reduced, through paradox, back to absentia. The two larger triangles in the middle show how the invisible lines of force pass through the manifestation of the universe to endlessly replenish the outer absentia, like the lines of force that run through a magnet. By being identical in appearance, these two triangles accurately represent the idea of a singularity that is also binary. They are the same singularity, but in two locations, or two forms, binary. Conversely, the two palm prints illustrate how the sides of a universe are not identical, but are split by the singularity of the absentia. The two keys hovering over the two large absentia triangles illustrate the absentia as two locked boxes, each containing the other's key. We could view these as the same keys found on the Hierophant card of many tarot decks, the number 5 being the custodian of the ineffable inner absentia. The two hands drawing each other symbolize the interdependence of form that exists between absentia and universe, and the idea just expressed of ultimate symmetry and how a split absentia equals unified universe, and split universe equals unified absentia, and how that relationship can be seen as analogous to God drawing man at the same time man is drawing God. Is that God drawing man in his own image, or is that man drawing God in his own image? Can one really draw the other without the other drawing the other? It's a case of mutually assured creation. Unity is dual. Paradox is the irreducible crux of universal flux. It is possible impossibilities with impossible possibilities. It is incompatible interdependence or interdependent incompatibility. It is disagreeable agreement or agreeable disagreement. The outer rings, that contain the triangular arrows, are in 18 segments. 9 along each mirrored path to stand for the 9 numbers of numerology that describe the universe that separates the 2 points of absentia. The palm prints could represent the left, sinister, evil versus right, virtuous, good of a mind that has acquired knowledge of the tree of good and evil. The 4 operations of mathematics represent how the idea of a quaternary becomes a natural result of this 1 into 2, 2 into 1 ultimate symmetry of a dual absentia and dual universe working together. There are many spiritual philosophies that speak in paradoxical ways, but without ever using the actual word paradox in their text. Some do, but many don't. They hint around about it, they give instructions for living that are rooted in it, they make outright declarations of spiritual fact that attempt to both enlighten and confound at once, but all too often do not state the obvious, that paradox is the irreducible crux of universal flux. As stated, the absentia is a theoretical Godforce that, by its necessary exclusion, stands as a logical opposite, and thereby perpetually births a universe of everything and nothing. Some of the points made within the dissection of the absentia verse might have led some to suspect that, by this necessary exclusion, a statement is being made that God does not exist. Many great philosophers have attempted to logically prove that God does exist. I am not a great philosopher, but, like everyone, I have an opinion to share. Thus, it would be my opinion that indeed God, by necessity and design, does not exist. Many of the ontological arguments that I've read that attempt to prove the existence of God seem to center around a wishing makes it so type of mindset, or a because I say so kind of mindset. They argue that if I can conceive of God, God must exist. They argue that because I can conceive of God, God necessarily exists. As a devotee of paradox, I would argue just the opposite, and state that if you can conceive it, it is not God. It's something else. Here is the argument. God should be ultimate. If you can imagine God, you have not gone far enough to be ultimate, there is one more step you have not taken. God, by necessity, must be unimaginable, inconceivable, ineffable, unknowable, or otherwise impossible, a confounding, perpetually unresolvable paradox. Paradox being the closest a human brain could ever get to its imagining of a God. Therefore, by necessity and design, God does not exist within our conceivable, knowable, and possible universe of mortal minds thinking and imagining. Even minds contemplating confounding, perpetually unresolvable paradox. That's the short, thought-provoking argument. Let's dissect this. God should be ultimate. A bold claim, with no logical proof, other than the obvious, which would be, if God was not ultimate, there would be something that is, and we would likely want to call that God. If you can imagine God, you have not gone far enough to be ultimate, there is one more step you have not taken. This is where many arguments in favor of the existence of God fall short. Like cattle encountering a barbed wire fence, many great philosophers will not venture into paradox and notions of the impossible. To many, paradox is nothing more than a nuisance. To many, paradox is an indication that reasoning has gone wrong. This is where so many fail. Thus, truly, the Lord is their shepherd, and their reluctance or refusal to embrace paradox is the border collie that keeps their minds herded forever within the possible, conceivable, and knowable. By excluding the impossible, we are thus, logically, limited. We need to take that final step. Sadly, many don't. God, by necessity, must be unimaginable, inconceivable, ineffable, unknowable, or otherwise impossible, a paradox. If our perception and conception of God is not unimaginable, inconceivable, ineffable, unknowable, or otherwise impossible, there will remain something that is. We will likely want to call that God. Why is being unimaginable, inconceivable, ineffable, unknowable, or otherwise impossible supreme, rather than inferior? Because it represents that which is beyond the reach of mortal minds and existence itself. Therefore, by necessity and design, God does not exist within our conceivable, knowable, and possible universe of mortal minds. The universe of everything and nothing is here because the Absentia Godforce is not. Like a martyred Savior dying for the sins of others, God does not exist. So that we do. To say that God exists is to lower God to the level of mortal thoughts in the minds of humans. To be ultimate, God must be beyond the reach of mortal minds and all forms of existence. Being impossible accomplishes that. Many of the arguments I've heard about the existence of God don't really define what they mean by existence. My definition suggests that existence be defined as that which can be conceived or realized within the limits of the finite and the infinite. The absentia is, by definition, design and necessity, beyond each of these, i.e., inconceivable, ineffable, unknowable, or otherwise impossible, a paradox. It is called the absentia because it is necessarily absent from any finite or infinite universe that might ever attempt to perceive it. However, if one wanted to prove the existence of God, one would only have to extend their definition of existence to include the inconceivable and impossible, and embrace paradox as the irreducible crux of universal flux. If this is a stated preference, then God exists. To repeat in summary. If existence were to be defined as all that is possible in a universe, i.e., everything and nothing taken together as one, the infinite and finite taken as one, and if God is defined as all of existence itself, then God exists as existence itself. But if God is supposed to exist within the context of existence itself, i.e., some sort of actual, possible, knowable entity or being existing within a universe of existence, then God would not be ultimate to existence itself. God should be ultimate. To be ultimate, relative to existence itself, God would have to not exist within the context of existence, or even as existence itself. To be ultimate to all that is possible, God would need to represent an impossible realm beyond existence itself, a realm that is beyond the reach of any conceiving mind or possible existence. That is what we would likely want to call God. Therefore, unless definitions of existence are extended to include the impossible, God, by necessity and design, does not exist. If, however, definitions of existence are extended to include the impossible, then God does exist, and paradox becomes the closest possible approximation of God that any mortal mind could ever conceive. God exists only by the inclusion of exclusion. Existence is only when God isn't. God is paradox. Many feel that the mere ability to conceive of any notion of God, paradoxical or otherwise, means that God exists, if only in our minds. But a God of paradox is essentially a God we cannot even conceive, because of how self-nullifying and impossible paradox is to our minds. Thus, to conceive of God as paradox is to conceive of God as something inconceivable. God is a beginningless beginning without end. God is a circle with a circumference that is nowhere, and a center that is everywhere, a place without a place. Only knowable through not knowing. Conceivable only when inconceivable. Impossible. When impossible. All is possible. Shorter summary. If you spend perpetuity following a looping paradox in pursuit of a God that is forever just out of reach, you never obtain anything. God never fully exists, even if you spend every second of your existence looping around and around to grasp something that isn't there and gives you nothing, because it is in absentia. Okay, that's enough about that. Let's see what comes next. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Hope it didn't make any sense at all. Links to eBooks, decks and merchandise below. And, if anyone is interested in drawing a deck based on this system of organization, don't hesitate to contact me for a collaboration.